Okay. So welcome everyone. Thank you so much for coming tonight to join us for our peer-to-peer distribution training. My name is Nicola Brogan. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the Assistant Director for the American Society for Emergency Contraception, which is our parent organization over emergency contraception for every campus. That kind of oversees all the research and more professional resources that we provide to advocates and healthcare professionals. Tonight I have with me Jasmine Shabazz, who's one of our team members who will be helping me do the formal presentation side. And then we have a couple of our fellows here who will speak about their experience with peer-to-peer distribution and share any tips and tricks that they've learned along the way that will hopefully help you, whether you're just starting out or are looking to revamp and expand the program you're already doing. So we'll go over EC 101, the importance of emergency contraception. We'll spend a decent amount of time covering confidentiality and liability. It's been a question that's been coming up more recently, and we've had a couple students put themselves in a corner where we don't want them to get in trouble for what they're doing. Then we'll talk a little bit about the peer-to-peer distribution models that exist, and then you'll have an opportunity to hear from our fellows and ask any questions that you may have. Okay, so just to get started, ASEC envisions a world in which everyone everywhere has affordable access to emergency contraception without barriers or stigma. This is our mission. It's been the mission of the organization since it started. And in the early years where we first focused majority of our work with more of the professional side of the industry, working with healthcare providers, researchers, and advocates, in addition to lawyers and policymakers, we've since shifted our focus to also include a very important aspect of the field, which is the consumer and, more importantly, young people, since they are the largest target population for emergency contraception as a product. So to give you a little bit of background on the options that do actually exist for emergency contraception, we'll start with the Yutsby method. So this is probably one of the oldest options for emergency contraception. Basically, what it is you take a combination of prescribed birth control pills, depending on the brand. You take so many of each pill in a certain sequence over a course of several hours in order to get the desired effect of preventing pregnancy. The reason why the Yutsby method was so popular and still is talked about today is because it may actually be one of the most available options for emergency contraception, especially for folks who are already prescribed birth control and are potentially receiving multiple months worth of dosing all in one shot every time they go to the pharmacy. I know for myself, I pick up a 3-pack supply every single time I stop at the pharmacy. So this is something that I would potentially consider if I didn't have access to other EC. The downside to that is it does require a prescription. It is less effective, and because of the estrogen component to prescribed birth control pills in those combined pills, you're at a higher risk for feeling and experiencing some of those side effects that you hear with EC. So the nausea, the vomiting, the GI upset. The next option for emergency contraception is levonorgestrel EC. It is what you see that's over the counter in any pharmacy and now actually in some dollar stores and convenience stores across the country. Many of the brands you'll hear are like Plan B, Julie, Take Action, Aftera, and Cadence OTC, to name a few. Since 2013, it's supposed to be available over the counter, which means you can walk into the store, walk up to the shelf, grab the product off the shelf, and go and purchase it. So in theory, it's the easiest to get. However, it is one of the lesser effective options out of emergency contraception. And in actuality, we recognize that practice doesn't always match what regulations state. And so in many circumstances, folks are not actually able to pick up the product without first speaking to a store member, whether that's because it has a security mechanism on it to prevent theft, or because they believe that you require medical counseling for a product that has been deemed safe enough to not require counseling from a healthcare provider. The third option is a second form of emergency contraception pill. It is prescribed and is known as ulipristal acetate, or by the brand name Ella. It's not always widely available. We're often seeing in pharmacies that this pill is not readily stocked, and so it requires your pharmacist to order it in, which could result in a delay in when you actually receive the product if you're in kind of that narrow window of when you can take it after unprotected sex. but it is considered more effective than levonorgestrel EC. And we will talk a little bit about the efficacy in a bit on why there's that difference, but that is something to take note about. And then lastly, the last form of emergency contraception that exists is the IUD. Traditionally, people thought about only having the copper T IUD inserted as EC, but as recently as last year, there's some research to suggest that hormonal IUDs are just as effective in preventing a pregnancy if inserted postcoitally. The downside to this is it does require a prescription, but it also requires a healthcare provider because it needs to be inserted. And the insertion process itself can be uncomfortable for somebody, especially if they're nulliparous or have never given birth. But it is considered the most effective option for emergency contraception. And for folks who are looking to prevent pregnancy and have a long-term form of contraception on board after using EC, it is a great option to consider because you can get years of protection out of it. Okay, so we'll talk a little bit about safety. So emergency contraception pills are actually safer than many of the over-the-counter drugs that we see on a day-to-day basis, including Tylenol. They won't harm or end a pregnancy if somebody takes it when they are already pregnant, and that's because the mechanism of action is very different than that of the medication that would end a pregnancy, also known as an abortifacient. Some of the side effects you may experience with EC are nausea, headaches, a bit of vomiting, and cycle changes. So your period coming earlier or later, potentially a little bit lighter or a little bit heavier than you're used to. But usually these side effects are mild and they go away on their own after a couple days. And one of the biggest things you need to know about EC, and one of the biggest myths we hear about EC, is it can be used multiple times in the same month or the same calendar year. There's no safety concerns about using it as ongoing contraception. It's just not as effective as if you actually got a contraceptive method that's intended to prevent pregnancy on a regular basis, because EC only works in a very specific time during your menstrual cycle, which we will talk about. So going back to that, which one's more effective versus the other, that's all based in a little bit of research that was to suggest EC pills may be less effective for different users with higher body weight. The unfortunate thing about this research, and this is coming from a lens where I myself am a researcher, Kelly, who's our executive director, is a researcher, is the studies that demonstrated this were not actually intended to demonstrate the effectiveness with weight classes. It was just a circumstance where they were able to collect enough data from the other study that they were running to make some sort of assumption based off of what they were seeing. So because the evidence isn't clear, the stakes are incredibly high for folks who do fall in higher BMI classes or higher weight classes, especially when they live in conservative and restricted areas. And so we always recommend that for patients who have a higher weight, they try to seek out Ella or an IUD if possible. And if it's not an option, then it's still worth it to take Plan B, because it's not saying it won't work. It's just saying we're not sure how effective it is in your BMI or your weight versus somebody who is under 165 pounds or under a BMI of 26. Now, the same thing applies to Ella. Ella actually may lose its efficacy after 196 pounds or a BMI of over 30. And so it's something to consider. But again, if all you have access to is Plan B or Ella in a positive circumstance, and or you're not interested in having an IUD inserted, we're still never going to say don't take it, because it's not a hard fast, it won't work. We're just not sure how much it decreases based off of your weight. The other thing too is for folks who are interested in an IUD and really want the best shot at preventing a pregnancy after unprotected sex, the IUD is the only method that works at any weight. Do anybody have any questions before we move on?
I had a quick question. I did a thing with a club a few years ago where we were talking about like different kinds of like contraception. And one of the things we came across in research was that if you take Plan B and then for whatever reason throw up, you should take it again. Do you guys know anything about like if that's true?
Okay. I'm going to put my nurse hat on for a second because I am also a registered nurse. If you take any medication and you throw it up within 20 minutes, there will be some providers that tell you to redose. from our perspective, because we are not healthcare providers, we don't provide that recommendation to anybody that throws up within, let's say, a half hour of taking emergency contraception. So what I would say to you is, if you have a student ask you that question, refer them to a clinic that's in your area. Maybe that's your school, like your campus health care center. Maybe it's a sexual health clinic in the area, or maybe it's a Planned Parenthood. But I would just be wary about providing that information, because there's mixed reviews on when to second dose something after you vomited versus when not to. And we don't want you to open up any liability or risk for yourself, which Jasmine will talk a little bit about in a few minutes. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Okay. So I mentioned that EC doesn't harm a pregnancy or doesn't work for somebody who is already pregnant. And we talked a little bit about why, and that's because it's different from medication abortion. And so the biggest reason for why that is because emergency contraception works to prevent ovulation or actually delay the process of ovulation. Therefore, if somebody is already ovulated and that egg has now been fertilized by sperm, it's implanted and has created a zygote that's eventually going to grow into an embryo, there is no mechanism for EC to work at that point, because its sole purpose is to prevent that ovulation, which in turn prevents the rest of the cycle that results in a pregnancy. And so it's very specifically used as contraception after sex. And we try to recommend that people either keep it on hand through advanced provision if it's a prescription-based medication, or if they want to have a pack from you guys who are distributing it, or if they go buy it at the pharmacy so that they're readily available to take it. Because despite its nickname, the morning after pill, it's really important for people to take this as soon as possible after sex. And so if that unprotected encounter happens at 9 in the morning, you're not waiting until 9 the next day. You're going to try to take it maybe by 11 a.m. or a couple hours after it happened. Now, medication abortion is actually a combination of two medications, mifepristone and misoprostol, or it can actually just be misoprostol used alone. And its mechanism is to end a pregnancy up until approximately 11 weeks. Both of these medications must be prescribed and are often, you're often counseled through all the side effects that you may or you should expect to experience. Sorry, it's been a long day. My brain's not working. And you will have conversations with healthcare providers when accessing this product to ensure that you know what to do with in terms of your follow-up care, what to expect during the process, bleeding wise, etc., and when to seek out emergency services. Okay. So I think most of you probably already know this, but one of the things we like to cover when we're doing our trainings is to talk about why EC access is so urgent. And so, as already mentioned, EC pills are more likely to work the sooner you take them. And so any barriers or delays that a person experiences after unprotected sex increases their pregnancy risk. And then pregnancy prevention is really at its most urgent than ever, especially in states where there are continuing advances towards very restrictive laws around abortion access and other reproductive services. And then speaking very specifically about individuals who have experienced sexual assault, they'll need EC as soon as possible without interference to prevent that further stigmatization, but also the further trauma that comes with experiencing such an event. One thing that I'm sure many of you can understand is that barriers do disproportionately impact vulnerable populations. So when we're talking about neighborhoods of lower socioeconomic status, individuals who speak English as a second language, individuals who don't have good access to healthcare, whether that be because of their insurance, because they live in a healthcare desert, because they live in a pharmacy desert, you know, barriers related to their skin color, their religion, anything you can think of, obviously impact these populations at a higher rate. And so making sure that they have EC within their own community in a way that they understand it and know and trust the source of where they're getting this product from is very important. So at our project, Emergency Contraception for Every Campus, or EC4EC, we're trying to work with students on colleges and university campuses across the nation to provide EC to other students and young people in their community. we've come to realize that not all schools have health centers. And in fact, since COVID, some schools that previously had health centers have since closed those centers. And so if that was the only point of contact on campus, now students are at a complete loss other than going to a pharmacy where they may be spending $50 on EC, and nobody can afford that on a good day. Some institutions do oppose contraception altogether when you're talking about religiously affiliated schools or even schools that are in heavily conservative areas. They may have total bans on condoms, on prescription contraception from their health center. And so being able to provide access to EC secondary to the school and outside of like your relationship as a student on that campus can be a really important access point for many students who don't know where to go. We recognize that many health centers on campuses have limited hours that don't match student schedules, because nobody's going to, or what should I say? Nobody really expects you to only have unprotected sex between Monday and Friday, 9 to 5. And so making sure that you're building access points outside of the conventional business hours so that maybe somebody can access it at 11 p.m. on a Wednesday night or at 10 a.m. on a Saturday morning without having to bat an eyelash at it. And then EC is really expensive. On average, many of these products are $35 to $50 at pharmacies. In convenience stores and dollar stores, they may be closer to the $20 mark, but for many working students or many young people who are just starting their career, that is an incredibly expensive product and not something that you are necessarily able to spend money on in a pinch. And then despite all of our hard work, no matter what we say, there will always be an ongoing stigma around anything to do with reproductive autonomy. And so being able to build new access points where it's coming from a safe and reputable individual in their community helps to limit that stigma and create the privacy that many people see or crave when they're seeking out these products. So what's working in our favor? Emergency or leave-in adjustable emergency contraception going over the counter back in 2013 actually is a huge game changer for the entire field because it made this product readily available for anybody without age, gender restrictions, or ID requirements. And it was a big vote of confidence from the FDA to recognize that anybody who is at an age where they could become pregnant are able to make a decision about whether or not this product is the right thing for them in that moment. Private sector continues to innovate to try to support access, primarily through the implementation of vending machines on campuses. There are many different companies like Shield T3 and Simply Check who are able to work with a campus or a student directly to install a machine where they can provide the stocking and the maintenance of the machine. And while it may not be as cheap as we would like the product to be, it's still a more affordable access point or has greater hours for access outside of the health clinic or the pharmacy on campus. Young people are fired up and you're all ready to lead. I know I'm still technically considered a young person, but sometimes I feel old when I'm working with all of you, and I'm always blown away by your innovation and new ideas to try to make this happen on your own campus. And so the momentum's really there. There's a great network of you working together in order to ensure that this is happening, which will only continue to help us grow the movement and to get access to as many people as possible. And then because of that, there's momentum is on our side, and there's a lot of news articles and rhetoric about what we're doing and a lot of support that helps to drown out some of that negative feedback that we often see from the anti side that we may hyperfixate on because we're always looking for ways to counteract what they're saying, but the general population is actually quite supportive of what's happening. So just to give you a little bit of perspective of where we're at, we launched in March of 2020, which if any of you remember, was a terrible time to launch because that's when COVID decided to shut down the entire world. But since then, over the last 4 years, we've been able to work with students in 45 states at over, we're actually probably closer to 400 colleges and universities now, with about 300 of them as four-year institutions. We're continuing to grow our involvement with community colleges and working with students there, understanding the unique dynamic of being there for either a longer period of time as a part-time student or a shorter period of time, depending on the type of program they're taking. And we're continuing to work with over 100 schools to continue to implement new EC vending machines, especially in states where there is now legislation to support it and require it on public institutions. Are there any questions before Jasmine takes over? No? Okay, go ahead, Jasmine.
Okay, like Nick said earlier, my name is Jasmine Shabazz. I am the project coordinator for the American Society for Emergency Contraception. The next section that we will talk about will pertain to confidentiality and liability and how to best avoid giving medical advice, seeing that we are not healthcare providers. This is meant to help you understand what your risks are, as well as how to best minimize them. So on to the next slide. Is EC distribution legal? Yes, but we highly encourage you to double check your state laws, given that we unfortunately live in a time where reproductive healthcare laws do come in flux, and to also double check about the distribution of over-the-counter medications. There is minimal risk or liability when it comes to distributing emergency contraception, just because it is available over the counter. But there are some ways that you can reduce your potential liability as well. This includes not giving out medical advice because we are not healthcare providers, and then making sure that you're taking the proper safety measures when it comes to product distribution, including making sure that you're checking expiration dates. Do not give out expired products, storing your emergency contraception at the correct temperature, which is 68 to 77 degrees, and for product tampering, as well as checking for product tampering, like I just said, and maintaining confidentiality, because we do live in a time where reproductive health care and access to it, even pertaining to things such as EC, can invade people's privacy. So if we go on to the next slide, to go more into privacy, we often get questions surrounding EC distribution and HIPAA. HIPAA is the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act of 1996. It is actually a law that sort of prevents the sharing of healthcare information in regards to personal identifiable information. This is mostly associated with healthcare systems and health insurance coverage, specifically when it comes to healthcare providers and businesses from disclosing protected information to anyone other than the patient and their authorized representatives. So HIPAA does not pertain to emergency contraception distribution. You should also take reasonable measures to maintain that confidentiality and anonymity whenever possible. Collect as little personal information as required and store that personal information in secure forms. And then also purge all identifying information as soon as possible. You should also provide a disclosure on what information volunteers will have access to and how that information is also handled, just to protect the privacy of the students that you are working with. So another question that we often get is, does DOBS apply to EC? Emergency contraception pills are not abortifacients and do not work if a person is pregnant. In general, abortion laws do not pertain to emergency contraception. However, there have been some states that could decide to restrict access to EC. So definitely check current implementation of your laws in your state, as well as their current interpretations. We also have on this slide links to the abortion law interactive maps for you to see the abortion laws in current time, and they are updated as things pass, as well as the EC state laws as of 2023. So as I mentioned before, it is extremely crucial to not offer medical advice to people receiving EC. This can open you up to liability, and you should also check your materials to ensure that they don't give medical advice. So as you can see within our quick facts EC document, it has things of like, when should you take EC? Do you need to see a doctor first before you see it? Is EC safe? What should you do after taking EC? And does body weight impact whether EC works? These are all facts that are more than likely found on the package that are more readily available for students to go over. You should also include a disclaimer that this is for informational purposes only and is not intended to be medical advice, to make sure that you are covered and protected from any forms of liability. We also highly encourage you to use materials from well-established organizations like EC4EC and similar reproductive health organizations as well, to make sure you're giving out accurate information. So to help you distinguish what is and isn't medical advice is a provision of a formal professional opinion regarding what a specific individual should or should not do to restore or preserve health. The reasons why you shouldn't offer medical advice is, very simple. You are not a trained healthcare professional. While some of you guys may be pre-meds and may be wanting to enter the healthcare profession, you are not quite there yet. And while it may be well-intentioned, you do not yet have the knowledge or skill or judgment to provide medically accurate information. And it opens you up to the risk of liability, as mentioned before, if the intended outcome is not received or if someone experiences adverse effects. And being a medical provider means that you are also required to HIPAA compliance, which goes outside of the scope of distributing EC. So here are some things to avoid asking or saying. You can avoid asking questions such as, when is the last time you had sex? When was your last period? Do you have any medical history, and how much do you weigh? So those are things that are well outside of your scope in distributing EC, as well as advice to avoid giving, such as you shouldn't take EC because it's been too long since having unprotected sex, as well as it doesn't matter what other medication you take, you can still take EC or Plan B, and as well as you can't use Plan B because of your weight, it won't work. Before I move on to campus strategies with peer-to-peer distribution, does anyone have any questions about confidentiality and liabilities? Okay, all right, so I will continue on with peer-to-peer distribution, which is honestly one of the most popular methods of distributing EC. So does EC distribution work on all campuses? No. There are certain campuses, Catholic colleges, for example, that may prohibit the distribution of contraceptives on campus. And then in this situation, distribution off campus is often the most feasible option. If a school doesn't support EC distribution, do not use that school's branding and materials. I would say for liability purposes, because schools' brandings are often copyright materials, to not use the school's branding, just so you can avoid an additional legal liability of EC distribution that has more to do with the branding than the distribution of the medication itself. So find workarounds. We've had students at Georgetown who replaced a letter with a symbol in their school's mascot name. So Hoya's is actually a branded, copyrighted language for the school. And instead they use an asterisk for the O instead to avoid that legal liability. Okay, so it's important to build a team when doing EC distribution. Recruiting like-minded people is often best, whether they're existing group members, a part of an organization that you currently have. We know that a lot of students work within their Planned Parenthood Generation Action chapters, students that are in gender studies or related majors. And then you could also have signups at tabling events to increase the amount of volunteers that you have for EC distribution as well. To stock up on supplies and to make sure that you have a continuous flow of EC, we do have a few links for you guys to access. Free EC can be given through the Plan B donations website, where you fill out a form. They even have it know us enough to know that that people establish EC4EC chapters. So you can definitely click that as an option, or whatever student organization that you're affiliated with. You can also get, I believe it's now 1,000 condoms through the Advocates for Youth Condom Collective. They do this program every semester to have, I think it's up to 500 people across the United States receive access to free condoms to distribute as well. You can also check with your student health center as well as local public health and reproductive health clinics. And then for pregnancy tests, there are low-cost options such as Pregmate.com, local clinics, and even hitting up stores such as your local Dollar General or Dollar Tree stores that will have it at a largely marked down price compared to places like Walmart or CVS. You can also email EC to receive EC info at community@ec4ec.org. Yes, LA decisions just came out for Condom Collective. So to increase your support with EC distribution, we highly encourage you to get support from allied organizations. These might be your reproductive rights, health, or justice groups on campus, gender justice groups, your LGBTQ plus groups, as well as your women's or gender studies department. And then we highly encourage you to make new friends. There are tons of students within different organizations that would love to do this type of work and just aren't connected to the work that you do quite yet. So these might be your Greek organizations, student government, staff and faculty and resident advisors. We highly encourage you to build a greater network of accessing EC distribution on your campus. We've had students from different campuses work with their student government to actually get funding to fund some of their EC distribution projects, whether that's with peer-to-peer distribution models or with the vending machines as well. So on to the next slide of understanding your logistics. You should set up a communication system for people to find you when they need EC. This can be something like a Google form, text line, email, and make sure that all volunteers have access, as well as keeping that information organized and relating to your supply of how much supply do you have left, and keeping track of that in a spreadsheet. We also encourage you to get the word out through social media. Some student organizations have used stickers and posters to post around their campus, as well as student publications like newsletters or other stuff similar to that. So for getting the EC to people, some students organize meetups or drop-off hours, whether that's meeting a student on a safe space on campus, whether that is identifying a central place where you always do meetups. You can also do office or drop-in hours for people to pick them up. We've also had students utilize community outposts, whether that's a bookstore, bars, and coffee shops, where they will have baskets of EC readily available for people to pick up. And then some students have even utilized lockers as well. So some of the best practices for EC distribution, you should definitely check the expiration date, as I mentioned before. That goes into the liability aspect of all of that, as well as storing the EC at their correct temperature between 68 and 77 degrees Fahrenheit. It's also really important to include other sexual health products. Sometimes people don't just want EC, but they might want more information related to EC, condoms and pregnancy tests as well. We've even had some students also include menstrual products. You should set up a system that several volunteers can access. Like I said before, that's Google Forms, text lines, spreadsheets, and always prioritize confidentiality. This can be a very sensitive topic for some students, and we want to make sure that they are protected as best as possible. You should always figure out who can, should, or have worked with EC and identify who are your people for maintaining inventory, who's doing distribution and restocking and stuff like that. We also highly recommend making a plan for sustainability, which involves younger students or other community members, and to also learn how to source products. You should also figure out your boundaries and stick to them. We've had students operate from, let's say, 8 a.m. to 9 p.m. and then also understanding their travel distance just so that they can also maintain their own personal safety. Okay, now we will hear from Nick before you guys talk more with the regional organizing fellows.
Yeah, so I just wanted to highlight that last year was our very first time launching our regional organizing fellowship. And so we onboarded 8 fellows, which I believe we have 4 here this evening that I'll speak to you in a minute or so about their experience with peer-to-peer distribution. But these wonderful humans are located in 8 different states with the intention of being a point person if you're in their state, to provide technical assistance and ongoing support while you embark on doing a distribution method or trying to implement an EC vending machine. And so I will call on our fellows to introduce themselves. I'll stop sharing my screen, talk a little bit about what you have been doing on your campus and what state you're based in, if I didn't already say that.
I can start. So howdy, everybody. My name is Nimisha Shrikant. I am a current Master of Public Health student at Yale. So I am the Connecticut Regional Fellow. Prior to coming to grad school in Connecticut, I was in Texas. I was at Texas A&M University doing my bachelor's over there. And that's where I started doing peer-to-peer distribution work with EC and other repro products. We started our original service during the COVID kind of the ultra COVID era where everybody was pretty much in their apartments, not much peer-to-peer interaction going on. So we did contactless drop-offs because we used to go and table out in the student center and give out Plan B for free. But because we couldn't do that anymore, we did contactless. And then I helped systemize it and shift it once COVID restrictions were relaxed in the state to where we did contact deliveries again and just kind of expanded it. And then I've taken that model with me here to Yale, have implemented that here as well while I'm working on getting distribution services set up in other schools until vending machines come by, which will be a later seminar. Y'all should totally come and attend. That's me.
I can go
Hello.
next. Oh, never
No,
mind.
you can go. It's okay.
Okay. I'm Saray Sinbel. I go to Stanford University. I'm the California regional fellow. I started a peer-to-peer distribution technically my freshman year, but it really started my sophomore year. So it's been about 2 years. And I did the locker, which you saw in the presentation. So essentially people just fill out a Google form and we give them directions to the locker and they pick up their bag from there.
Hello, my name is Deborah Dede Efon. I am here at Charlotte, North Carolina. I am a senior double majored in public health as well as communication studies. Graduating in May, yay. So my peer-to-peer distribution system, I've actually done it in 2 ways. Last year, we had a locker on campus. So my volunteers would go to the locker and fill the packages there and then deliver to students on campus. We've always had the option to deliver to students on campus by meeting them in front of their dorms. And then as well as picking up where we meet students in the student union where our locker was located. Students could go there to pick up their orders as well. This year, we are operating a little bit different since the locker resource has changed. But I have quite a few students on campus that that maintain a large stock of my families and condoms, as well as some of the other safer sex products that we do offer. We offer pregnancy tests, lubes, dental dam, in addition to emergency contraceptives and condoms. But those students, twice a week, gather together, fill orders, and also go around the campus to the other dorms, delivering those orders as well. And we still do offer pickup at the student union. So if there are any questions about the methods that we use to, just let me know. I am in North Carolina, of course, so welcome to help anybody down south.
Hi guys, I'm Ella. I go to school Loyola Chicago, so I'm in Illinois. Our group is called EC4EC, and we're in our 3rd year of running, so we're pretty established in terms of peer-to-peer. Loyola is a Catholic university, so a vending machine is very unlikely, so we're very settled with our peer-to-peer distribution. We are mainly Google based, so we have a shared Google Drive. We have 7 people in our group, one with each day of the week. And basically each day of the week is a duty day. So if we get any orders in via our Google form, they'll be in charge of that. We transfer the communication over to Google Voice, and then we figure out a meeting day, or meeting time and meeting place. Most of the time it's the day of because it's time sensitive. And then they will meet them there. We have a pink package that you can request a clear bag if they want some more security with that one, or privacy, I guess. And in that bag, we have 2 pregnancy tests. We have 3 panty liners. We have a package of ibuprofen because there was a study that went out that said that it is possibly more effective. And there's also just a pain reliever aspect of that too. We have 2 mints because sometimes it can have nauseating effects, a dum-dum, and I might be missing something. Oh, the EC fact sheet, and the EC obviously. So we're pretty settled. If you guys have any questions about how we do our inner workings or are in the Midwest, just let me know.
Okay, I think I'm the last one, but my name is Lauren McMillan. I'm a senior at Hampton University, which is in Virginia, and I operate the peer-to-peer distribution for Generation Action, well, the Hampton University's chapter Generation Action. It's been ongoing for a long time. We use Google Voice, so we have an anonymous number, and then the numbers will text us and we respond X, Y, and Z. We use the brown paper bag system, so everything's in a bag where you can't see what's inside of it. We can drop it off to the person. We do like, if you can be like, oh, just drop it off on this bench in front of this building, X, Y, and Z. It just depends on the person and what they want. Some people like to hide their identity, so they don't like to meet at my car, but some people do, and that's just how it goes. We do provide pregnancy tests, Plan Bs, condoms, pads, tampons, a little EC fact sheet. Oh, dental dams. Yes, that's it. So yeah, it's pretty good. It's pretty successful, and Google Voice is really good to use. But outside of that, if you're from anywhere in the Virginia area, even like West Virginia, I would say reach out to me if you have any questions. And we also do promote our hotline. We call it like a reproductive health hotline on Instagram. We have like our own separate Instagram for it. We like announce, like sometimes we'll do days where like we'll sit in the health center parking lot and just do like pickups for like 11 to 1 or X, Y, and Z. We'll like announce all of those things on the Instagram. So yeah.
Okay. I'm just gonna address a question from Gage about using Google Forms or other surveys and how to protect the student information. So I would just say that depending on what you're using the form for, so if it's like their application to receive the product or whatever else you're handing out, just be mindful of like what information do you actually need from that student. So do you need their name? Do you need their phone number? Do you need their email? If you need their name, do you really need their last name, or can you work with just a first name? That way, if they choose to use like a nickname or an alias, that's fine. And then just remember that, like, obviously, if you can build a system where a student can remain as anonymous as possible, that's ideal. But really just have like any form of security in check to like maintain their privacy. So make sure that if you're using, like, let's say you create a Gmail account for your group that multiple of you are going to be able to access. So let's say it's called like the reprohotline@gmail.com. Make sure that whatever password you use is only shared with people that should be accessing the information in that email, or however that form is linked, or whatever email that form is linked to. And just like regularly change your password as often as you see fit. Maybe that's, once every couple months, maybe that's twice a year. And then when you're done with that information, if you don't need it anymore, just delete it. And that's like the most appropriate way. There are lots of groups out there that straight up text, like one of our previous students who's since graduated used her own phone number to text students who needed products because she felt comfortable doing that. And that's okay. If you want to use Google Voice so that you have a masked phone number as a group, and then that way individuals who are reaching out to you can mask their phone number, that works too. So yeah, just work through like what contact information you need. And then if you're struggling and you're not sure, like, you're like, I think I need this information because I can't find another way to do it. I'm not the person, I'm not the person to talk to, but all these lovely fellows probably have some workarounds for that. But yeah, there's no harm in asking that. Like, I think most students are going to be comfortable probably sharing their phone number for the purpose of connecting with you. They may not want to share their school email if they don't have a personal one that they want to use, just because they don't want it to get back to the school, and that's totally fine. But I'm sure whatever you put in place will be the appropriate measures for protecting that information.
Nick, can I also speak about that?
Yeah.
So when I did my peer-to-peer distribution model, mine was a little bit different. I operated for the entire state of South Carolina and not necessarily for a particular campus. So with that, I had to collect addresses and names, and then people would text me using their phone number. So as soon as I received any identifiable information from someone, I would delete it. So I would, for example, if I had an address, I would write it down, delete it as soon as I see it, and then mail the EC package to them, and also have the return address to them. So worst case scenario, if something goes wrong, it also protects me in that it doesn't go back to me. But now the post office has this random package with emergency contraception that is now not going to anyone, and they have nothing to do with it. I think that is the best practice of when you receive any type of identifiable information, make a note of it, and as soon as the package is given, delete that information.
Yeah. There was another group too that I think similarly to Ella, where they like just were asking for a phone number, and then I believe it was like their co-leaders had access to the form where people were requesting EC. They would coordinate the time, and then they would just ask that person to wear something identifiable and give their volunteer a description of what that person was wearing, and where they would meet. And that's how they would kind of connect, instead of more than just the two main people knowing everybody's name and contact information. So that's another work around it too, if you want to restrict the number of people who have access to the contact information. Lauren, you can share. I like that you raised your hand, and then Sophie, you can go right after.
I don't know if this exists. Well, I was phone banking yesterday for like Florida, like access to abortion. Yes on 4 campaign, it's called. Like when you phone bank, like they never get my number and I never get their number. And I don't know how they do that, but like this situation would be like perfect for exactly what I did yesterday. Like I called like 15 different people and I never got their number. And then they never had my number. There was no calling back. Like it was just kind of interesting, but I think when it comes to like being like anonymous with like who you are and like sharing information, I think it would be kind of cool, but I'm not exactly sure how that even works.
Go ahead, Sophie.
I just had a question regarding like liability too. I just didn't have like a chance to ask it. It was about so we're trying to start a peer-to-peer distribution kind of access in California. But when we've tried to get it started at our school, we are not allowed to put up posters, which is like okay, whatever. But they also said that we could be liable because it's like we wouldn't be allowed to give out Advil. So they also make a profit by selling it on our campus. I was wondering, how do we work around that?
Yeah, so we work with a pro bono law group that helps to do legal analyses and liability, like risk assessments. And so generally speaking, the risk assessment that they did is there is there's minimal liability, both criminally and civil, to you as an individual if you were to give a peer over-the-counter medication. Where the schools try to cross that boundary is if they get the sense that you're trying to represent the school by doing this work. And so that is where it's really important to be very separate. Like obviously you're a student at that campus and you want your fellow students to have access to what you're doing. But when you set up your program, to make it very clear that it is a separate entity outside of your student status, and to do so by you know, maybe only hosting events at like the local library or at a public park, or naming your distribution group, whatever you want to call it, if you're not working as a Planned Parenthood, Gen Action, or another repro group, something that's completely separate to your school branding, even if you're like using that trick that the Hoyas for Choice group did. Which school do you go to, if you don't mind me asking?
I go to Scripps College, so it's a historically women's college. But we have one vending machine, but it's at the co-ed college and we don't have access to it, and it's also really expensive. So yeah, our college is the only one that doesn't really have access.
Yeah.
The co-ed
Yeah, so
schools
we're just-
do.
Yeah, so I would just say like your liability is minimal as long as you follow our recommendations on not providing medical advice and taking as you know, as much reasonable what's it called, steps to protect the product and make sure it's like not expired, it's stored properly, etc. And then to just operate completely outside of the school. So I would just not push the envelope by doing any of the work on school. I would say any meetups that you're trying to do in the early stages, you should try to do in a public setting off of the campus's property so that they can't somehow pin this back on you. We've ran into this issue quite a few times at several schools across different states. I think it's really a disconnect between their legal group and what our legal group has to say, but really there's like there's no law that prevents you from doing this. Does that help at all?
Yes, that's really helpful, actually. Thank you.
You're welcome. And for any of you that are experiencing that that pushback from your campus because they don't want you doing this and they claim that there's a liability piece to this, just email me. Kelly and I deal with this on a day-to-day basis, and we can try to help you formulate some language to either send back to the department that's claiming this, or if they're receptive to it, we're happy to meet with whatever spokesperson is responsible for that conversation and to try to help them better understand where the risk assessment is coming from our side. And then on our website as well, there is a liability analysis that you can find on the peer-to-peer page that you're more than welcome to download and use that in any conversations you're having with your administration. Okay, I got a message about collecting data. So this person was asking, are we able to collect data, nothing identifying, but for example, gender, year, etc., to try to use this as working towards better services depending on the info you receive? So I think I mean, from a research perspective, there's always a reason to understand who, what, why, when, where, right? And so what I would say is if you're trying to use this information to justify what you're doing and to try to expand it through further funding opportunities, more donated product, whatever the positive outcome would be for your distribution model, it doesn't hurt to ask that information, but I would always just say that make those questions optional for the folks that are using your service, because you don't want them to deter from actually accessing EC because they're scared to share that information with you if you make it a requirement. But I wouldn't say that there's anything against collecting non-identifiable demographics for the purpose of hopefully growing what you're doing and being able to find some more concrete funding to support it. Okay, so for how to fund these programs, so a lot of the times with peer-to-peer distribution, you don't need concrete money in order to get started. You just need the product. So I see that our fellows are dropping some really great recommendations for where to look at getting products and how to kind of kickstart the process. But one way around it is if you really are in a pinch and you need some money to put into your program in order to get things up and running, because you don't want to just offer free EC, you also want to offer pregnancy tests and all the other things that aren't free. Donations are a great opportunity. You could do like a car wash, you could do like a Venmo fundraising activity, whatever works best for you, especially if you're working in a pre-existing club, to use that money or to gain that money to then put back into the program. And I would just say that if you're doing that and you're collecting money in order to spend money on products to provide to students or to young people in your community, just be very transparent about what your plans are with that money. A, it makes people feel better about what they're donating to, and B, it may light a bit more of a fire under their butt to maybe give you $10 instead of $5 to really get your feet on the ground. Yes, I can drop our emails in the I'm also going to share this recording and the slides with everybody that's here and anybody who wasn't able to come. And mine and Kelly's emails are in the slides. So that way you'll have it that way. Plus you'll get an email from me. And then if we don't have a club behind us and as an individual. Yeah, CJ, you can absolutely do this as an individual. Amber Wynn single-handedly, which was a little bit nuts, I'm not gonna lie to you, but she did a lot of EC distribution by herself in the middle of COVID because her entire team went off to wherever they were from out of the state because school went virtual. And so you can definitely do this, and we can definitely help you work through all those like kinks in the beginning that you would probably need a team to sort through. And any of our fellows can connect with you. I can connect with you, but this is definitely a very obtainable project. You just need to make sure that you're scaling it to what you as an individual can handle. Both for yourself as well as for if you have a team of volunteers, what your volunteers can also handle. Are there any other questions? Because we're just at about the hour mark. Okay, so I will just share with the rest of you that are here. Thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate you taking some time on your Wednesday night to sit with me, Jasmine, and our wonderful fellows. Stay tuned. In the next couple of weeks, we're going to be launching office hours. They'll alternate which day of the week as a week 1, week 2 kind of schedule, so that if you have questions, concerns, you want to share a celebration, you want to come hang out and work with us for an hour, like you're more than welcome to join that space. And then if you have any interest in EC vending machines, we'll also be hosting that training on the 22nd. So please feel free to register. If you're not able to attend that session, please still register, and we will make sure you get the recording for that session. And then once you've watched it, you can attend in office hours if you have any follow-up questions. And then if you're not already in the Slack, I will send you an invite to join. It's a great opportunity to network with other student leaders and to, again, bounce ideas off of each other, ask your questions, and celebrate you. This is some really tough work, and we're always so excited to see when you're making a difference in your own community, no matter how small you think it is. So please feel free to share all the clout for yourself, because we would love to share it as well with our greater community, especially if you're okay with us posting it on Instagram. Okay. And yes, I see your email. I will definitely add you to the Slack. I hope you all have a great rest of your evening, and please feel free to either message me on Slack or email me. Oh, and you're welcome. Thank you for participating. We really appreciate it.
So I just had a quick question.
Yeah.
I was sent this by a family friend who's an abortion provider. So I'm not like in any